Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Being Black in Publishing Forum. I am Rhoda, Marketing Officer at Cassava Republic Press. We're thrilled to have you here. Being Black in Publishing is a Cassava Republic initiative designed to connect seasoned Black publishing professionals from across the world with aspiring young African and Afro-diasporic individuals interested in finding out more about a career in publishing. So throughout the month of October, we are hosting a series of panel conversations with very skilled individuals who are sharing their insights, skills, and networks, and just general guidance needed to break into the publishing industry. So we started off last week with very insightful panels on editing as well as literary agenting. If you were unable to join us, not to worry, we have the panels recorded and they're all available to stream on our YouTube channel. So make sure you catch up with that. Today, we're continuing the conversation and we're going to be focusing on design for publishing. And we have an exciting lineup of speakers who will be introduced shortly. So before I move on, I just want to share a few housekeeping points. We welcome everyone in the audience to join the conversation, join the chat. You can share your comments and thoughts in the chat box. Also on social media, if you're comfortable doing that. And you can use the hashtag Being Black in Publishing. And be sure to tag us at Cassava Republic so we can engage with you. During this session, we're going to be taking questions at the end. So get your questions ready for our panelists and they will be answering your questions. So another exciting part about this forum we're hosting in October is an internship program. So we're going to open up, or we have opened up actually, for applications for internship slots for young people based in Nigeria at this time. Hopefully in the coming years, we're able to open it up to a wider audience. So we partnered with different institutions in publishing like bookstores, like Woven Heights, publishers like Masube Books, Narrative Landscape, and they're all offering internship slots. So if you're based in Nigeria and you're a young person interested in publishing, you're more than welcome to submit your application. You can check our social media platforms. That's Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook for the link to apply. So moving on to today's session, we have Milo Freeman, who is an award-winning illustrator and author, who is also a Cassava Republic author as well, who will be speaking to us. We also have Ebdian Iqbal, who is a studio manager at Penguin Random House, and we have Leah Jacobs Gordon, who is a freelance book cover designer, I beg your pardon. So moving on to our conversation proper, I'm going to ask all of our panelists to tell us a bit about themselves and also what inspired them to pursue a career in design for publishing, and also what aspects of the field do you find most rewarding and exciting? So we can start with you, Milo.
Well, yes, I've been making picture books for about 25 years now, so a long time, writing and illustrating. And it happened a little bit by chance because when my son was born, I started to make illustrations for him, and these ended up in a book. So it wasn't something I consciously pursued, but I love the publishing world. It's really it's a great place to be. And well, what I find really rewarding, of course, is to make your own stories and to visualize my own stories. And this also goes for the design, actually, because I also always try to make a sort of a design for the cover of the books. And then the actual designer of the publisher usually follows that. So, yeah, I think to be so, how do you say that? Self-reliant, maybe you could say. The things I make up, I can, realize in the book. So it's a great place to be.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Milo. We'll go to Leah next.
So I feel like I've had quite an interesting route into this. It wasn't something that I started straight out of school. Actually, packaging and brand design by day. I've been doing that for about 10 years now. And growing up, I'd always been really into art and books. So it's interesting that now those two things have sort of come together. And yeah, it just happened by chance that when I was beginning my career, I was sort of like, well, I really do love books, and maybe I can sort of try and see if there's a route for me in here in this design space. And applied for a job, and they said, well, we actually love your work. Do you want to freelance with us? And the rest has been history from there. And 6 years later now, I'm working with so many publishers and independent authors and things like that. So it's been an amazing time. I think the most rewarding and exciting thing is that I think there's so much freedom. I think I agree with Milo. There's so much freedom within this industry. With my packaging and brand design, I think a lot of the work that I do usually stretches over like months and months, or be sometimes years that you're working on a project. Whereas within publishing, it can really be quite sort of close knit and quite tight in terms of timescales. So it's really nice to be able to sort of work on a book from conception all the way up to seeing it in the shops. I think that's really, really enjoyable part of it. So yeah, that's me.
Awesome. Thank you, Leah. Evian, go next, please.
I think similar to Leah, I kind of had a slightly different journey into design. So my role as a studio manager is an in-house role within Penguin Random House UK. And I sit within the design team. So my role is within the design team, but I'm not a book cover designer in terms of in-house. And my role and my kind of journey has been quite interesting in terms of I initially started out in book production. So I started out in the production team and worked over there for over 10 years and kind of for 10 years, and so in a more project management role. And I kind of always had a passion for book design, and if actually book covers was something that kind of drew me into book publishing. So I hadn't studied design at university level, but thought I want to be in the book industry, and kind of never knew what this role was in terms of studio manager, and found myself kind of coming into it. And so effectively studio manager is only one role within the publishing house or within my publishing house, and is kind of more project management. So in terms of working with the design team to make sure everything in terms of the covers are meeting all the different dates, and in terms of the processes, and just making sure what I love about the role as well is speaking to everyone within the organization. So whether it be the editors who are working with the authors, the design team, making sure that they have everything they need, all the way up to the sales team and production, who are the people that work on the final part of the stage in terms of getting it printed and in bookstores as well. And for me as well recently, and kind of over the last few years within as studio manager, I've also been working on commissioning designers. So working with designers such as Leah in terms of commissioning them for projects and working alongside them. And for me as well, that's been something I've loved, just kind of working with various freelance designers and being kind of a person in between the in-house design team and publishers and editors, and also the freelancers, and kind of being part of that process as well in terms of that cover creation.
Great, thank you so much, everyone. Something I love about our panel today is how you all occupy different roles within design and publishing, which means you bring in different experiences, and your contribution is quite diverse. Because with design for publishing, it can range from creating social media videos and contents to creating cover design, illustrations for book projects, to even being a writer like Milo Freeman, who has been doing this for decades now. A lot of design in publishing is also freelance, as we can see with Leah, especially with like small publishing houses like Cassava Republic. So a lot of publishing companies have in-house graphic designers as well, which is what Evian shared with us. So moving on, the whole concept of being back in publishing is for us to introduce to more people just information about publishing industry and how to get in, especially an underrepresented community like Black people. So my question to the panelists is, why do you think we need more Black designers in publishing?
Well, because there's very few of them. We need many more. Yeah, there's, it's so important to have more different voices, more different uh, views on design. And here in Holland, we do have an organization that's called Rose Stories, and they are an organization that invites people of color to enter into a sort of a course where they can write a story or illustrate stories, and at the end of the course they can pitch it to publishers. So that's a good way to get more Black people or Asian people into the whole world of publishing, and I think that's really important. It's going really slow. I mean, there is some progress, but that is the question. There's so few very Black designers, and also people working in publishing, publishing books. So we need more.
Yeah, very straightforward, short answer. That's it. We
Okay.
need more people in publishing. I definitely agree with that. More designers in publishing.
Yeah.
I
If
agree
you
with
wanted
Milo.
to share.
I agree with Milo in terms of there's a lack of designers, illustrators, creatives, both in Black spaces with in-house and kind of freelance roles, and kind of all around publishing. And I think it's an issue where I remember kind of when everything happened in 2020 with George Floyd, and in terms of the rise for Black Lives Matters. I think for me, I was kind of aware, I was already aware that there was a very clear lack of Black designers just because of the people that were available to us in terms of commissioning. But one thing that really kind of shocked me was the lack of illustrators, not only Black, but in terms of from South Asian and other kind of diverse regions. And so I did a quick collection, kind of going over the 10 illustration agencies that we use within Collective with Publishing, and found that only 3% of those people were from non-white backgrounds. And I think for me, it was one of those things that was quite highlighted in terms of the lack of people that we're finding and working with. And I think one of the things that I think for me is quite important of having different people of different, so it's kind of from ethnicities, it's different perspectives. And I think there's been growing rise over the last, especially again, over the last few years, of getting more Black authors published. But we also need to address that by making sure that we also commission Black designers for projects, and again, not just for those projects, because again, I realized that we have around maybe 5% of authors, or hopefully growing now, are people of color that have published in terms of books. So we shouldn't just make them niche and just for those books. We're making sure that designers, Shona Leah, for example, works across all types of genres, not just only in the literary type space where mainly authors from Black areas are mainly published in. So kind of making sure that we have opportunities for them across all spaces within literary, commercial, children's publishing, and just making sure that we are more, especially kind of living in London where it's quite a diverse area, making sure we are representative and showing different perspectives is quite key.
Yeah, no, 100% agree with what everyone's saying. It's very true. I think a story that comes to my mind when I think about this question is that I was brought onto a project and it was fairly late in the day with the project. They brought me on like as kind of like a last hope because they weren't really happy with what the initial design had been with a previous designer who wasn't Black. It was 2 Black authors, a book for young Black people, young Black girls specifically, and they just weren't very happy for whatever reason with the previous design. So they brought me on as a last resort, and they were just so blown away by how quickly I understood what they were trying to communicate. And it was just one of those things that's just so instinctive. I understood their background, I understood what they were trying to communicate, I understood what they were trying to say with this book cover and what we needed to do to get there. And I think that is so necessary because I think there's just some things that we ourselves know. And sometimes it's just not possible. It's not always the case. Sometimes obviously there are amazing designers who are able to do that. But I just think it's so important to have that sort of, I don't know, someone to lean on within that space, especially for books which are so important and so niche within that area. And yeah, generally just across the board, I do agree that we need, more Black designers just as a whole across various different, for all different types of backgrounds, whether it is, Asian or white or whatever, just because we bring a different perspective and we might have a different insight. So yeah, I just think it's just great to just have a diverse group of people working on things. It shouldn't just be one viewpoint. So yeah.
Yeah.
So just to add one more thing to what Leah said, actually to follow on, actually, which is quite important. I think it's quite interesting what I think Leah kind of touched upon, where she had that lived experience, but maybe that white designer didn't have, and even though I'm sure they're a great designer, but didn't have that lived experience. And as well, so to add on to that is as well, then we avoid following on to certain tropes. And I think in terms of one trope, which I know we're all kind of aware of, is the silhouettes, in terms of where there's a main central character, you just use a silhouette. And I think that was something that's been quite clear highlighted, and in a way kind of having someone who is from that kind of lived experience and would have understanding, actually maybe representing that character and showing, especially for children's publishing, showing a young Black girl on a book cover is so key, and making sure that someone feels that they are being represented and not moving away from it, and kind of not, so it's kind of using it as a thing that we should not maybe talk about, is something that in a way we need to kind of be aware of as well.
Yeah, and sorry to follow off what you said, it's just even just little things, just like with hair, and just seeing how people design hair, and they're trying their best, you know, they might not be from the background, they're trying their best to sort of communicate that, you know, different textured hair, whether it's 4C, B, whatever. But I think they're just, even hairstyles, different. I remember someone like asked me, oh, wow, you added edges onto the illustration that you did. And it was just like, well, yeah, because she's a teenage girl who's probably living in that sort of space. Of course, I'm going to add that in because I know that sort of thing. So I think there are so many different areas. It's just so important to have someone with a different viewpoint who probably knows about that specifically. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for those insightful contributions. So you all briefly touched on children, and you touched on diversity, right? And I want to zoom in particularly on children's picture books now, especially for Milo that has been illustrating and writing children's books for decades. Can you speak to this and the role in having more Black illustrators can play in just painting the picture? Like what impact does it have on children for there to be more Black illustrators, designers in publishing? Maybe Milo can start.
Yeah, well, it has a very big impact, of course, because this gives, well, in this case, Black children a chance to see themselves in picture books. And especially because with books, with picture books, you begin with the pictures, you know, the words. I mean, obviously there's a story there too, but that in a way comes later. The picture is so direct and so important. So I think from what I hear from responses from kids, they really love to see themselves back into the pictures in the picture book. And I think, you know, as a Black maker or a Black writer and illustrator, I do a lot of readings in schools and libraries around the country. And I think that is also important to show to kids, well, you can, you know, as a Black person, you can do either write stories or illustrate pictures, and that's a profession you can aspire to also as a Black person. So it's a in a way it's a two-way thing, you know, as a Black maker, and also showing them the books with the Black characters.
Awesome, thank you so much. Leah, want to share something?
Sorry, could you just specify the question, just so I make sure I'm covering it properly?
Yeah, sure. So we're just trying to zoom in on children's picture books and what seeing themselves reflected in these titles will do for them growing up in terms of diversity and just the impact it will have on them.
I mean, again, another story that I can think of is I remember being about 5 and my mum had bought one of those books where they changed the name of the characters depending on the child that is for. So my one had Leah on it. And I remember she'd had to go through and like color in all of the pictures brown because they didn't have the scope to sort of change it for, you know, a various different skin tones. And I think even the fact that I remember that now 25 years later, it just made me sort of realize that there wasn't a space for me within this sort of book, or, you know, even though I could tell that obviously they changed all of the names, but they weren't able to change the skin tone to make it feel like it was something that I could relate to. And I think it's just so, it's been, I think one of my favorite things about being a designer, a book cover designer, has been the fact that I'm able to squeeze in Black characters wherever I want. Even if it's like, even within my packaging design, to be honest, and brand design, I often make sure that this is going to be diverse by force. I'm going to make sure that I get Black people in here. So I think it's one of my favorite things to be able to sort of like, to influence that. And not only that, even with a lot of the times my illustrations are based on actual Black children that I know. So I love being able to sort of like be like to my little cousin, like, oh, that's you. I've made that one from you, or I've made that one from someone else. And even nuances within like, oh, I make sure that that one has, you know, darker skin, but that one might be lighter skin tone. I make sure that there's diversity within color within that as well, because it's just so important. I want to make sure that my younger cousins are able to have a different experience than I did when I was coming up. So yeah, I think it's very important.
I think, you know, just to add a little story, how I started this whole series of Princess Arabella. And I just finished I think the 16th book about Princess Arabella, but I started the series like maybe around 15 years ago, when I heard a story about a little Black girl who got the role of princess in a theater play. And she said, well, I cannot play a princess because princesses are white and have long blonde hair and blue eyes. And I'm Black, you know, there's no such thing as a Black princess. And this girl was around 8 years old, 7, 8 years old. So when I heard that story, you know, I thought, well, this is like incredible, you know, this is shocking. And even I hadn't ever thought of the image of a Black princess, because everything we've been shown up till then were like white princesses with, of course, long blonde hair. So this was my motivation to start this series around Princess Arabella. I mean, it's so simple, you know, you have to see the images and then you can think, okay, I'm here too. You know, I can aspire to be whatever, a princess or an astronaut. And it's just, you know, you just have to present the image. Well, you have to do some more, but it's a start.
Yes, thank you so much for speaking to a very important subtopic in design and publishing in general. I think it's interesting how I was saying to someone recently, like the kids are so lucky these days because you go to the bookstore and there are lots more stories about kids that are set in Africa and beyond, like just speaking to the Black experience, a lot more characters that look like us, which wasn't the case when we were growing up. Like I remember it was Snow White that flooded the shelves, any blighting books. I'm not to say those are bad, they're good, but it's just nice that the kids have a lot more options these days, and it feeds a lot to their imagination and how they see themselves. So thank you for sharing. Our next question is going to be about skills, definitely, that people would need to get into design and publishing. So if you can share some of the specific skills that you think people would need, and would need to succeed in publishing. For APN, I think you can share like what you are looking for when you need to commission, for example, a book design. And yeah, maybe you can start for us, please.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in terms of overall in design, I think one thing that is great that's moving away from is a design degree qualification, which I know that in itself is a barrier for entry into publishing for people from diverse backgrounds, but it's more kind of showing a range of design work. So say someone who, and maybe this is kind of portfolio related, but in terms of with their work when they're submitting, especially if they're quite new into design and publishing, is using a book cover that you love. So whether it be a Toni Morrison, an Enid Blyton, or not Enid Blyton, but another kind of book cover that you love, and just effectively reinterpreting it and just reinterpreting what that cover you think could look like, and maybe looking at covers in that market space, but also from your perspective, and again how you kind of reinterpret it in your style. And that's a great way, in a way, to show kind of people that you want to kind of maybe work with in terms of what you can do, even if you haven't had opportunity to freelance or be commissioned previously. And in terms of, again, I think I would say website is quite key. And so I say for the website, making sure that it's quite, especially if you work across different areas, whether it be design, illustration, lettering, to make it all quite clear in terms of categorizing them. So then in case people are looking perhaps to use you for lettering, for illustration, design, or photography, and so making it quite distinctive, or it's just not distinctive, but just making it quite categorized and quite clear and quite straightforward. It doesn't need to be very flashy, but just needs to be quite clear in terms of how it's presented, and quite easy to just, and quite accessible. And in terms of, again, with working with various people in house roles for designers, is kind of, again, having different skills, whether it be different packages that you can use, whether it be Adobe InDesign, Photoshop, Illustrator. And again, if you're not an illustrator, it's something that you shouldn't have to worry about. A lot of the time with in-house roles, designers can work with illustrators to commission for projects. And again, with Shutterstock and how things are moving along, it's quite easy to create a style that looks illustrative, but using stock imagery at times.
I'll jump.
Thank you. Milo, would you like to go next?
No, sorry.
Okay.
No,
Oh, no, it's all
I
right.
don't have a lot to add, but I
For the
would
break,
say
it's fine.
maybe, I would say maybe perseverance, and don't be afraid to be rejected. That is also, I think, a very important thing, you know, just move ahead, and don't be afraid that, you know, you won't make it. But if it's something you really love to do, just you know, never give up. And you need a little patience sometimes, you know. Well, I know I needed some patience because I'm very impatient, but yeah, just keep working and never give up.
I think that, like, from a freelancer perspective, definitely, again, what Ebian was saying, Adobe Creative Suite is a big part of it. Whether it's sort of the creation of the work versus the actual laying up things for print, it's a big part of it. And I know that's something that can feel daunting because, you know, it's expensive. So, and I feel like that's something that definitely needs to change, but definitely see if you can get some sort of, if it's a student discount or something like that, or see if, the various ways that you can sort of, you know, try and make it work. But I think it is part of the part of this career, a big part of it. Definitely another one would be Procreate on iPad, or various different, you know, devices that you can use. I think it's a big part if you want to be more illustrative. I use it quite a lot for my sketches. But again, like again, what was said previously, I don't think you need a whole degree. Personally, even though I have one in design, I don't think I necessarily needed it to get in. I think when I first got into doing freelance design, like, no one's ever asked me what my degree was. So I think once you start posting and start getting your work out there, I think the work will start to come to you. I think it's two big parts of this career is logic versus creativity. The logic side of things is just making sure that the words are legible, that all of the information's on there. You've got, you know, the author's name is really clear, the title's really clear, the, you know, quotes fitting really well, but then also how am I going to communicate this story in a really creative, fun way? And I think, yeah, loads of people are able to do that as well. So I think once you have those two things locked down, then it's all will go from there.
Thank you so much. Before we move on, I just want to say to the audience to get your questions ready and please put them in the chat. Any questions you have for our panelists, be sure to put them in the chat and we can pass it on to them later on. So Leah briefly mentioned something about putting your work out there, right? So what would you say to young people who are designers on how to reach publishers, how to make sure they're showcasing their work, and just how to get maybe the first commission and the next and the next? If you can just speak to that.
It's really tricky because, again, I've only had my own experience with this, and I feel I'm not sure if this is if my experience is very odd or not. All I can speak from is my own self, because honestly, it hasn't been very difficult to get people to sort of reach out to me. Just from, I think the last time I updated my portfolio was probably about 3 years ago, and people still reach out to me. I think, especially in this climate where people are looking for Black designers, this is your time to dive in there and get yourselves out there, because so many people are trying to sort of, you know, diversify their designer lists or whatever. So I think once you start putting work out there and the work is clearly good, publishers will come to you. They are looking for whatever books are out there. They're looking, you know, at the back of most books has the name of the designer. I've had loads of people reach out to me because they've just seen my book in a bookshop and they've been like, oh, a new designer that I haven't saw or whatever. So I would just say, just once you start posting things on Instagram or reaching out to various groups and things, I know loads of people have, you know, collectives of Black designers for whatever online. I think once you start being part of those sort of circles, I think it tends to happen. Because people will put you forwards for things. There's definitely been situations where Ebion's put me forward for something, or people at Cassava Republic have put me forward for things. Like, it's such a close-knit environment that once you start putting your name out there, it starts to snowball pretty quickly, in my experience anyway. So yeah, I think just go for it, definitely.
Yes, definitely. The power of social media, we cannot underestimate, because even for us in-house, when we're looking for, just looking for people for this Being Black in Publishing program, we've used Instagram a lot, we've used social media a lot. So putting your work out there definitely goes a long way in showcasing your work. I don't know if Milo wanted to add something with regards to this. Or
No.
okay.
Something I would just add as well from what Leah said, and I think what you said, social media is quite key. I think that sometimes is quite true for some people who don't like to be on social media, but I would say that is one of the key places, knowing from in-house, that we do look for people. So having maybe kind of an Instagram account and just keeping it active at times, updating at times, is quite useful. And I think what Leah said in terms of where she's been able to retain relationships, I think is retaining relationships. One of the key things is making sure once you've been commissioned to work with someone, and maybe work with them once, twice, to say, actually, if you are maybe in the same city, saying, I'd love to kind of visit you guys and show you my portfolio, and which a friend of mine told me recently that she does, because then effectively she's creating more connection with that publisher, and in a way they kind of, it's slightly humanizing that relationship. And so they're like, oh, I love working with that person, I'll go back to them again. And just again, being reliable. I think for us in terms of in-house, where sometimes we're working to really keep dates and kind of a key schedule, just being reliable in terms of meeting the dates that you've agreed, and just being someone that people want to work with again. And so in terms of to again retain that relationship, and so to be working with them on various commissions, hopefully over a long period of time. And yeah, I think that's what it is for me.
Also, just something to add on along with that, with the social media thing, because I'm not a person who's very social media heavy, in terms of, I don't often, I'm not an influencer energy type person, but that's the beauty of doing this career, is that people are just there for the books. You don't need to post yourself, you don't really have to interact in that way, as long as you're sort of posting your work then. And even if, as long as your work is just there, because like I've mentioned, I haven't updated mine in a while, but it's there, people can find it and they can find me. So yeah, don't worry so much about, feeling like you need to interact to build up your network. I think as long as, I think I've only got about maybe 300, 500 people or something like that on my Instagram, but I don't need all of those people. I just need the odd publisher to find me, and that's it really. I've done my job.
Yeah, that's very important. Ebian mentioned something briefly about just introducing yourself. Honestly, sometimes it works. Just go on LinkedIn, find who the editor in a publishing house you're interested in working with, and just shoot your shot, as the youngins say these days. Just send your portfolio. You never know what will happen. I remember there was a book fair last month, and someone walked up to us and said, I am an illustrator and I would like to share my work with you. And I said, happily, I'll pass this on to the editorial team, and who knows what's going to happen. It doesn't take much of your time, or just introducing yourself and make a difference. Thank you so much for that. So there is a very interesting question we have about the rise of AI, right? Everyone is talking about how AI is taking over, or is going to take over. So how has this AI affected design in publishing? In what ways? And what opportunities or challenges do you see your field facing with the rise of AI?
Well, I do everything by hand. I don't use the computer at all. I never delve into these Adobe programs. I always think between books, well, now I'm going to, really dive into these computer design programs, but then I think, oh, no, I've got other stuff to do. So I never work with computers. So I do everything with water inks and all, my painting stuff. So I don't know. Maybe my style can be probably it could be imitated by an AI program, but I don't. I'm not that worried to be honest yet. So no, I don't think it poses such a problem right away. But we'll have to see. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. I can't look into the future. I hope, it will be, there will be a place for me with my all my little bottles of paint. And so we'll have to see.
I think I've definitely seen it impact more on the packaging branding side of my career than the publishing so far, simply because a lot of our role is to sort of source out other people's illustration styles or whatever, or whether it's to sort of make a massive photographic collage or whatever. It's a big part of it. So I'm definitely seeing the use of AI being ramped up quite a lot. But I think the main thing that I've noticed is that with using AI is that I think what's most important is the idea. AI can come up with a thing, but I have to give it all the information first. So I think definitely put a lot more energy and time into your concept ideas and sort of like coming up with the actual thought, because that can't be taken yet from AI. We'll see how that progresses as well. We'll see how smart it gets. But as of today, it's not that smart. It can do an amazing copy of something, but you kind of have to feed it all of the information. So I definitely am leaning more into my art direction side of things rather than just being able to sort of just make something, which is great as well. But I definitely, as of today, I'd say that that's what we need to sort of think about a lot more.
Just to add on to that, in terms of within UK publishing at the moment, there is a big discussion about the use of AI. And so there is, in terms of with various publishers, including Penguin Random House at the moment, is something that's in discussion. So at the moment, we're not using AI in-house. And so any covers that we generate aren't at the moment AI generated. And it's something quite key that we need to look at initially, how it can be used and what side of things could be used on. I think what kind of Leah said in terms of branding types of things that can be used for, and in terms of within design, it's quite useful because there's a recent article, which I'm not sure if you're happy to share at some point, by the designer and illustrator Michaela Alcano, who did for LinkedIn, which was a discussion on AI. And if actually one thing she touches upon is, I think, not being too afraid of AI, in terms of, I don't think AI will take over. We'll still need designers and illustrators like Milo and Leah to work on the covers. And it's looking at some of the stuff that are generated by AI programs like Midjourney, in terms of the styles that the person that is mimicking, it doesn't, and which Michaela does say as well, because some of her work has been used as reference on AI. She kind of says it's not, there's no kind of relation to what she did. It kind of uses some of the concepts, but it isn't the actual work that she created. And so at times, so it won't hopefully take away her role, because people will still want to go to her and other designers, illustrators for their style. And I think in terms of it's important as well to kind of not be too afraid of it. I think with AI, there are tools that you can use. I think last week I went to a design talk where there are people from other industries who are using AI, and someone from one of the people who's there was an art director in more of a design agency, had mentioned AI is now being seen as a skill. So people using it are actually similar to how we use Adobe Photoshop and an Illustrator is actually a skill that some people actually are seeing as a benefit, to know how to use softwares and effectively how complex softwares are themselves. And so maybe just play around with it and see what you can do with it, but just be in a way look into the final result. I think in a way, kind of we can use it as ideation, but don't, I think, rely on it too much. In a way, don't kind of feel like this is the thing that I can use to create a cover or a design, or it'll take my job away in terms of me being a designer illustrator. Just use it and just play around with it. And there are a few free AI softwares, and few which are paid are quite, the costs of them aren't that expensive. But just looking at them and just being something that we can hopefully move with and kind of use over the next few years in a way that can actually maybe kind of refine things for us, and maybe making the things that are more heavier kind of processes more faster in some ways as well.
Thank you so much for sharing. I'm just going to be like Milo and be optimistic that we still have some time before AI takes over everything. Moving on to the next question, I would like you all to share some examples of design projects that you've worked on, maybe your favorites, and also like share the creative process as well. For Leah, you have to work like with a brief. For Milo, you're doing your own thing, and I'm really curious about how you do everything by hand, how you now transfer that to a computer. Would love to know. And Adrian as well, if you can share anything with regards to any exciting design projects that you've commissioned, some of your favorites, that would be great. Milo, you can start as well.
Yeah, okay. Well, I can show you a book cover that from a book I made that Cassava is going to publish in English soon. It's called, it's not for children actually, it's called About Ladies and Bags, Handbags. And I wanted, because I really thought it was really, it's a book about obviously handbags, and some famous and some not so famous women, but all very interesting women. And I wanted on the cover, of course, I wanted that it represented all ethnicity. So I wanted to have a diverse look. And so the three ladies are all in there, and then the letters, or the typo, I think you call it, is also very important, and is actually quite big also. And so there's this part is a bit shiny. So I mean, I'm not like a really designer, of course, but I think it came out really nicely. So I'm very, very happy with it, how it came about. Actually, also very curious to see how the English version is going to look, because I understand Cassava had some different ideas about the cover, but we'll see.
Awesome. Can you just walk us through your creative process as well, like how you go about painting by hand and transferring that to the computer? Milo?
Oh, sorry, did you ask me?
Yes, please.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you
Yeah.
Sorry, I was waiting for another. Can you ask the question again? I'm sorry, I didn't.
Yeah. So if you can share your creative process, like how you go about doing your paints by hand and then transferring that to the computer, and yeah.
Oh yeah. Now, of course, I of course I do the drawings by hand, but I also always make a sort of a mock-up little book. So I can have I'm trying to see if I have one here. So I can have a sort of a impression of what the book is going to look like. So sorry, I'm just having a look where it is. Oh, I have to grab it here. So what I do is I copy all the I make copies of all the drawings, color copies, and then I make a sort of a title myself. And I do that with the computer, and then I print it out, and just to see how it looks. Of course, this is really like a little fluffy thing, but so it gives me an impression of how the book will sort of going to look, and how the pages follow up on each other. So that's a little bit of how I do this process. And then, of course, the in-house designer of the publisher sort of refines it in the end.
Thank you. That is so fascinating to me. I find the design process by hand, as a computer kid, we don't see much of that happening.
Oh,
So
I
I'm
know.
very fascinated by that.
A little like dinosaur, but oh well, it works for me.
Yeah. As long as it comes out great. Thank you for sharing. Leah, can you go next?
So I've got a few, so I'm gonna rush through them so I don't take up too much time. Hopefully it will let me share my screen. Is it gonna let me? Oh, good. Oh, I don't think it's gonna let me. That's so annoying. Oh, it's fine. I'll grab one of the books off my shelf.
Yeah.
So I've got a few versions here to show you, just for a few like diversity in terms of different things that I've worked on. So this is, oh, let me turn off the blur. Not gonna, is it gonna work? No. I've worked on previously. So it was one that was done mostly in Photoshop. So it's a lot of comping together. So this wasn't actually like an illustrative thing that I worked on. It was mostly art direction. So they wanted to communicate the idea of the sea and the ocean. You can sort of see the lighthouse there at the top. So this one, I was definitely using a lot more of my art direction skills and trying to sort of like come together lots of different aspects that I found on stock imagery to produce an illustration style that's maybe not similar to my own. And then you sort of see on the back as well how that sort of progresses over to the back and how you can sort of see on the spine and things like that. So a lot of things I work on in that sort of manner. And then one that I did illustrate was this one here. So again, it was sort of a bit more like my own personal design style. Let's have a look at the open part there. So more collagey, a bit more graphic, again, sort of working with the publisher to sort of come up with an idea that sort of works for this specific book. But yeah, and then sort of getting it ready for print and all of that sort of jazz as well. And then this one here, I worked on, so I wasn't an illustrator for this one, I did art direction for it as, again, but then also designing the book and designing the typography and the color palette. They sort of wanted to deal with it in a sort of a brand idea. So sort of how can we sort of give this a look and feel that feels unique to this particular book? How can we sort of, you know, have assets that can take outside of the book? So for a website or for social media, what's their brand color? What's their, you know, typography style, that sort of thing. So then working with the illustrator to how are we going to design this cover? What's, you know, the theme going to be? What's the concept going to be? And so I can brief her and then get the illustrations back as well. So that's that. And sign as well. So yeah, those are three books that I've worked on.
Yeah, nice.
Thank you so much for sharing. Can you share about the design process as well? Because so you wear two hats, one sometimes art direction, sometimes illustrator. So how do you go about your design process?
So I think I think one of the first things I do is you speak with the person briefing you, sort of trying to get an idea of what they think the book should look like, and then also what the general vibe of the book is, especially because I can't read every book before I begin designing them, or I'd be stuck there for weeks on end. It's impossible. So you kind of have to like really communicate well with whoever you're working with to really get an idea of what this is about, and what they sort of think it will, you know, what it will look like. I think a big part of it is also paying attention to trends within book genres, because a lot of books have specific looks. Before you even begin, there's a look that you're probably going to try and angle towards. So paying attention to that, but then also trying to break the norms with that as well, so you don't follow it too much, so it becomes a repetitive thing. And then once I've gotten all that information, then it's about, you know, trying to come up with ideas, whether it's sketching or mood boarding and things like that, various ways to sort of start putting down ideas. Whether it's, if I'm working with an illustrator, then it's, you know, trying to communicate with them and try and sketch out ideas so that they can go away and do work. If it's all more photographic, then I go and do a big stock hunt and start going through lots of stock imagery and trying to find the one that's right. If I'm illustrating it, then I'm sketching out and getting that all together as well. So yeah, lots of different ways in, but yeah, eventually come out with a book.
Thank you so much. Vivian?
A book project that I'm really quite excited, or a book project I commissioned, and so it's a book called, unfortunately I don't have a book with me, but I can send the link. It's called Take Care by Chloe Pierre, and so I commissioned that book, and so I'll just type in the names in case anyone wants to have a look at the book cover. I commissioned that book alongside a colleague of mine, my previous publisher. So it's a book ideation in terms of a concept that finding Chloe Pierre, who's a British wellness ambassador, who has a platform called Thyself. And so initially this book on Black wellness, and especially looking at for Black women's wellness at a time when we most need it. And so I initially I kind of always knew we wanted to work with a Black designer illustrator. And so one of the key things was looking, and as well, kind of when we talk about kind of having Black designers and people within kind of the design space, me being in-house at that time, I was quite vocal about what I thought the book cover should look like. So initially from the briefing stage and saying, actually, I would think we should have a illustrative Black woman on the cover, so it can be quite representative. And so working with the author initially in terms of creating the book brief and making sure as well Chloe's voice was kind of initially from the initial inception, to make sure I was aware of what style she was like and what ideas she had. So rather than just involving her towards the later stages, make sure that she was part of the conversation as early on as possible, and kind of working with her kind of initially on looking at some illustrators that we thought could work for this project. And then I was able to commission an illustrator and found a illustration of hers that actually we thought was perfect and wasn't commissioned previously. So working with the illustrator again in reinterpreting and kind of refining that illustration for the book cover, which I then, when it came to us in-house, I was able to as well design alongside Chloe as well, and kind of again making sure that we had an aesthetic, especially Chloe, the author, being someone with her brand being quite having a key understanding of that aesthetic and the market the book would sell in, and just making sure that it was representative of that market, and making sure that everyone who was working on that project could be as involved as possible and had their voices being heard, for me was quite key.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your different book projects and creative process. So we're going to be wrapping up soon. I'm going to ask the audience again, if there are any questions, please put them in the chat and we'll get to them. Yeah, so the next question is about recommendations that you all have for young people who are keen on design in publishing. So what sort of courses, workshops, or resources can you share that will be beneficial to people? Anyone can start.
I would say get to your local bookshop if you can. If you can't, then go online. And I often look at bookshops, like online versions of bookshops that aren't even in the country that I'm in. So whether it's Waterstones or Barnes and Nobles or even just Amazon, just looking at lots of books all the time is probably quite handy, just because you do pick up the genre, norms, you do pick up what other designers are doing, and like there's definitely some key sort of tips and tricks that designers use that it would just help speed up your process loads in terms of just making sure that this is a book that actually can function in the real world. So I think my main tip would definitely be to just start looking at every book everywhere, and just get your general Adobe Creative Suite skills up. There's loads of online like places on YouTube and tutorials and things like that you can pick up as well. But I think once you've got those two things down, I think, yeah, you're on your way, definitely.
Yeah, I agree too. Look at books as much as you can. I also am very inspired by images on Pinterest, for instance. And I also really love fashion. So I look at a lot of pictures and photographs of yeah, pictures on Pinterest, and of course social media also. But yeah, keep aware of trends that are going around, and also really, it's really important to develop your own style. I mean, that takes time, of course, but I would say yes, keep your eyes and ears in a way also open to the world.
Just to add on in terms of finding inspiration from what is available to you, I would say kind of go to exhibitions, to museums, in a way, again, kind of being able to look at different artists that you kind of find, and just any day-to-day life things can inspire you. I mean, living in London, you kind of walk down to various streets and to various cities I've visited as well, and you see wonderful art and just wonderful scenery, and just in a way using what's around you to create work. From a more practical side, I would say if you kind of want to kind of maybe do tutorials, I think YouTube, which I think they touched on, has some great free tutorials that you can find different skills. So if perhaps you haven't used Adobe InDesign or Photoshop or Illustrator, there are various tutorials online that will show you kind of different tips and effectively different filters or element design work that you can use to kind of step by step. And I think that, I would say, is a great way, especially kind of at times where the cost of doing certain courses can be probably at the moment, especially kind of not something within everyone's means. And I would say as well, sign up to a lot of design resources, or kind of in terms of online directories. So again, showcasing your works. There are various design directories available across the world. I think Black and Brown publishers and Designers in Color. And in terms of where are the Black designers, have a great Slack site, so you can sign up to that, and it's free for anyone to sign up. And it has great resource site of various directories that you can sign up to, and also has events as well. So depending on, again, I think they have mainly focused on the US and UK events, but in terms of people can post about events in their area as well. So again, if you want to kind of look at where the Black designers, which I'll put in the chat as well for another resource, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing from your wealth of experience. We don't have any questions till now, but to our audience, if there are any questions that you have after the session, please feel free to send us a message on our social media for any of our panelists, and we'll share with them and share the response with you. Just for us to close, can we get final words from our panelists? Any last words, advice, anything you want to close off with?
I mean, feel free to reach out to me if you're looking to get into freelance design. Like, I feel like it feels very like daunting to a lot of people that I speak to, and it's really not. So if you've got any questions, or if you want a hand, or if you have a portfolio you want me to look over, I'm more than happy to do that. So again, feel free to reach out to the guys, and yeah, good luck.
Yeah, well, I'm not a designer per se. I'm more an illustrator, writer. But yeah, if you want to, if I agree, if you have a question, please let me know. And I think, well, the publishing world is the best world to be in. That's I want to close up with that. So and I wish everybody good luck, of course.
I would say as well, if you have any questions or anything that you'd like to ask, again, feel free to get in touch with Casper Republic, and they can provide my link. I think one thing I'd say as final closing word is, I think the publishing industry needs diverse people. So I would say at the moment, and things are improving, I would say kind of from my perspective, in terms of from when I first started, which might be now 15 years ago, to where we are today, I can say the great thing is I can say there are a lot more diverse people from different backgrounds, from underrepresented backgrounds, and particularly from Black communities in the publishing world. So don't feel like you are alone. And in a way, if you might be the only person at times, just create that space for yourself, and just create a zone, a comfort zone, that you can be comfortable in your space and not have to just adapt to that space at times, but be comfortable in your own space. So I would say is quite important. And I think just in general, I would say as well, kind of being, in terms of kind of going back to kind of what resource people can use, mentoring, in a way, kind of reach out to a designer within your own area or online, and just say, actually, feel free to kind of talk to people online. Is something that people, a lot of people I know, myself, engaging people, posting something to them and saying, I should love to kind of get your thoughts on this, is a great way to, in a way, create your own community as well, and to kind of find people within your own interests and people as well you can learn from. I would say it's quite key.
Great. Thank you so much to our panelists for sharing. This has been great, very wonderful session. APN has shared some tips and resources in the chat, so you might want to have a look at that. Thank you to our audience for joining us. We're so glad you're able to make time out to be here. The program is still ongoing. Tomorrow we have a session on book promotions and marketing, digital marketing. Next week, we're talking to some booksellers, so be sure to join us. All the information you need is on our social media. So like I mentioned earlier, if you have any questions for our panelists, feel free to drop us a line on social media, DM us, and we'll get that across to our panelists. So thank you so much again, and yes, all the best to everyone, and yes, have a good evening or afternoon wherever you're.
Okay.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Bye-bye. Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.